Story number 1. I felt so sorry for this woman that my husband and I saw at dinner this weekend. R/stories, Reddit stories. My husband and I went to dinner at a steakhouse this weekend. Not an incredibly expensive steakhouse, but definitely not the kind of place we go every week. We were seated next to this middle-aged couple who had only been there a couple minutes longer than we had. The tables were fairly close together and this man was pretty loud, so right away we started to notice them. The first thing I noticed was that she was dressed up a little. He was not. She looked like she was excited to be there. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I definitely got the impression that this was not something they did frequently. So the waiter comes to our table and tells us that they are out of the free bread that comes at the beginning of the meal. Sad, but okay. We ordered drinks and an appetizer and went about our lives. A few minutes later, my husband and I start noticing that the man at the table next to us is not letting it go. I'm not stupid. I know they have bread. He says. They just keep it in the back for the special people. At this point, my husband and I can't help but overhear, and we're trying hard not to laugh. We begin speculating about these special people. How do you become one? How does the waiter know you're special? How do they hide the bread from the tables around them? This man is just getting more and more angry as the meal goes on. Louder and louder, he insists that they must have bread. He says he's going to ask to speak to a manager. His wife begs him not to. She tries to change the subject, he just keeps coming back to bread. By the time they've finished their entrees, she has physically turned her body away from him and is barely speaking to him. She's muttering something about how he always does this, how she just wanted to have a pleasant evening, how they clearly don't have bread. The waiter comes with the check. He complains about the bread again. I should mention that our waiter was awesome, and he put up with these people like a champ. Calmly, he tells the man that they've sent someone to the location across town to see if he can borrow some bread, but he's not back yet and they don't know if the other location will have enough to spare. The man scoffs and accuses the waiter of lying. As the waiter leaves, the man opens the check and audibly gasps. He says the place is too expensive. He says they should get a discount for the lack of bread. The wife tries to explain to him that the bread is free, but he says the price of the bread is clearly worked into these overpriced steaks. Again, I should mention that this place is not outrageous for a steakhouse. He still really wants to speak to a manager. She begs him not to. They leave. A few minutes later, the waiter comes back to collect the check and makes a face like he definitely didn't leave a good tip. About 5 minutes after they leave, we're finishing up our entrees and we're about to order dessert. The waiter comes to the table and announces that they got a hold of some bread. Story number 2. Lost car keys scare. Two friends, Jake and Tyler, were on a road trip through the desert when they suddenly realized they had lost their car keys. It was already nighttime, and they were in the middle of nowhere. They searched their pockets, the car seats, and the surrounding area, but the keys were nowhere to be found. As the panic set in, the friends realized they had no choice but to start walking. They left the car behind and began to trek through the vast and desolate landscape. The stars above provided some light, but the darkness seemed to swallow them up as they walked. After a while, they came across an old abandoned gas station. The windows were boarded up, and the pumps were rusted and dry. They cautiously approached the building and peeked inside, hoping to find some sign of help. But what they saw instead chilled them to the bone. The gas station's interior was dark and empty, except for a flickering light at the far end of the room. They cautiously made their way toward the light and discovered a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting ominous shadows all around them. As they looked closer, they saw a small, handwritten note attached to the bulb. It read, "Don't look behind you." The friends froze in terror, too afraid to even turn around. But they could hear something moving in the darkness, something that seemed to be getting closer and closer. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream, and they turned to see a ghostly figure looming behind them. It was the ghost of a man who had died in the desert years ago and was now seeking revenge on anyone who dared to trespass in his territory. The friends tried to run, but the ghost was too fast. It chased them through the desert, laughing maniacally as they stumbled and fell. Finally, they came to a cliff, and the friends found themselves trapped with the ghost closing in on them. With no other options left, Jake and Tyler jumped off the cliff, hoping to find a way to safety. They landed in a dry riverbed below, and they managed to crawl their way to the safety of a nearby town. The friends never forgot their terrifying experience, and they never ventured into the desert again without being fully prepared. The ghost of the desert gas station remains, waiting for its next victims to come wandering by, keys in hand. Story number 3. Scary Piano Ghost. Once there was a man who had lost his right hand in a tragic accident. Despite the loss, he refused to let it hinder his passion for music. He would spend hours every day playing his piano with his left hand, pouring his heart and soul into the melodies he created. The man lived alone in a large house on the outskirts of town. It was an old and eerie place, with creaky floorboards and strange noises that echoed through the halls at night. But the man never felt alone in his home, as long as his piano was there to keep him company. One evening, as the man was lost in thought, his fingers dancing across the ivory keys, he felt a cold breeze brush against his neck. He turned around to find that all the windows in the room were closed. A chill ran down his spine as he realized that something wasn't right. Ignoring his fear, the man continued playing, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced over at the empty space where his right hand used to be and suddenly felt a sharp pain shoot up his arm. It was as if his missing hand was still there, and it was now haunting him. As the night went on, the man's piano playing became more frantic and frenzied, until finally he collapsed in exhaustion. When he woke up, he was no longer alone in his house. Standing in front of him was a ghastly figure with an outstretched hand that ended in a ghostly mist. It was his own missing hand, come back to haunt him. The man screamed in terror as the ghostly hand reached out to grab him, its bony fingers closing around his neck. He struggled to free himself, but it was no use. The hand was too strong. The next morning, the man's body was found slumped over his piano, with a look of pure terror etched on his face. It was said that if you listened closely, you could still hear the sound of his piano playing, even though the man was long gone. And if you ever find yourself in that house, you should be careful not to play any music, or else you may awaken the ghostly hand that still lingers there. Story number 4. My mom told me her love for me is conditional on if I help her with housework. My whole life for as long as I can remember, my mom has had a hoarding problem, meaning she constantly buys and doesn't throw anything away because she becomes attached to items. I think it makes sense because she has 5 siblings and was the oldest daughter and always had to take care of everyone, and she has expressed to me that she was physically abused by both her parents as a kid. But despite this we still live just 5 minutes away, and she still wants to please them and do things for them, which I understand but also don't. She also told me one time that I'm ungrateful and lucky that I am not hit like she was. I told her that's the bare minimum, and she just had this shocked and stunned look on her face and asked, "What?" And I had to explain to her that I'm not lucky simply because she doesn't hit me. For backstory, I am an only child and my mum is unemployed and receives government money for me. She doesn't work, but my dad does every day and is always exhausted and has been smoking W33D every day for probably years. I was in a really dark place last year and dropped out of college at 16, then turned 17 and spent almost a whole year in bed, depressed, unable to do anything and just stuck. I had been depressed for a long time. I asked my dad if I could try some W33D and he said yes after I kind of begged him a bit. At this point I really just wanted to try it because I felt like I had missed out on a lot of teenage experiences and just wanted to see what it felt like. I honestly thought getting it from my dad would be the best idea at first because it was at home and with someone I trusted rather than a stranger. Anyway, long story short, I ended up fucking loving it a bit too much and got addicted. I would smoke with him pretty much every night and occasionally sneak in the room and smoke what was left of the small buds. I don't want to get too into detail about this, but basically it became yet another addiction in my life as I was already addicted to vaping. Keep in mind I was 16 to 17 through all this and just turned 18 about 2 months ago. It is April and I quit vaping in November, and ended up in hospital because the withdrawal symptoms were so bad. I had an agonizing pain in my stomach that we thought was appendicitis. I quit weed around Christmas because although at first it made my anxiety a lot better, it began to make me paranoid, which is how I knew it was time for me to stop. Growing up, I could never have friends over because I was embarrassed and ashamed of how messy our house was. When I say messy, I don't mean just a bit. I mean there was piles of stuff everywhere and you could never see the floor and couldn't move without knocking something. My mum at one point acknowledged she had a problem and was taking a course on hoarding, but that was years ago and I don't know what happened. This was just really stressful for me as a kid, because I would constantly try to have some friends over but have to spend days or even weeks stuffing everything away into bags and into the cupboard just for it to look less messy. I would also do this if my parents went away to try and surprise them with a clean house and spend forever trying to organize everything. But within a couple days it would be messy again. My mum has been getting better as we now have a cleaner that comes once a week, which I suggested years ago but she never listened. But she still seems to not admit or even realize she has a genuine problem and should go to therapy. Just yesterday I was trying to do work for college, which is really important and takes a long time, because it is animation, and she kept coming in and showing me dresses she has bought even though I have a lock on my door and she knew I was busy. I was visibly annoyed and she asked what, and I just told her, "Why do you keep buying clothes? You get a package like every day." She of course got all defensive and started lying her ass off saying it's not every day when she knows damn well. I don't even know where she gets all this money when she hasn't had a job in over 5 years and is on benefits. Another thing is, back in my early teenage years I always struggles with social anxiety, which I now realize was actually probably autism, and depression. When quarantine happened in 2020 I had never been happier because I had just gone through a huge heartbreak and was burnt out from school and life and everything. However, even though this was super comforting for me to be at home all the time, things changed and I started having what I thought were anxiety or panic attacks every time my mum did something to upset me, which was almost every day, even something as simple as asking me to do the dishes or walk the dog. I felt like a lazy piece of shit daughter because I didn't understand why I was reacting like this. I now realize I had sensory issues and pent-up resentment for everything my own mother has put me through without even realizing it. I started questioning if I was autistic a while ago and never mentioned it to anyone because I was having a hard time accepting it. But I also found a sense of comfort knowing there was a reason I was like this. Story number 5. Indirectly beating my girlfriend with the piss-soaked floor. I wake up groggily and stumble to the bathroom, still half asleep. I relieve myself into the toilet and then head back to bed. As I'm dozing off, my girlfriend enters the room. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she says cheerfully. "Morning," I mumble, barely awake. As I drift back to sleep, I suddenly feel a warm wetness on my feet. I jolt awake and look down, horrified to see that I've peed all over the floor. "Sorry," I mutter, feeling embarrassed. "It's okay," my girlfriend says calmly. "Just be more careful next time." I'm grateful for her understanding, but I still feel ashamed. It's not the first time this has happened. I know I need to get help for my drinking problem. My girlfriend is always so patient and supportive. She never judges me or makes me feel bad about my flaws. I'm lucky to have her in my life, and I feel so badly that she's always slipping and falling in my urine and getting bruises everywhere. As she helps me clean up the mess, I make a silent promise to myself to get better for her sake, but I know that I probably won't ever get better, because I'm just a hopeless alcoholic. Story number 6. I really need help. I got recorded without my consent. I'm a girl and I'm 17, the guy is 20, I was in a long-distance relationship with a guy I really loved, but it was very toxic. Well, he was very toxic, a narcissist I'm sure, but I was too attached to him. And once we saw each other and we decided to have sex. It was my first time, smiley face, so I was a little scared, but I was happy to do it with him. After he finished, he went home and weeks later we had a fight. He told me he was going to get revenge and that he had a video of me. I was sure he was kidding, so I forced him to show me the video in screen sharing on FaceTime. So he showed me the video. I discover my naked body on the video. I recognizes me directly, and I realize that he recorded me during sex without me knowing. He told me that all my friends will see the video, my parents too, and that everyone will know that I'm a whore. I started to cry and he laughed at me. He told me that I had to kill myself. He told me that I was ugly and disgusting. I was destroyed and I was very scared for the video. I pressed charges against him. And I never talked about that again. He continued to call later, but I was in a trauma bond, so I couldn't cut contact. We stayed friends, but I realized that I won't be able to stay friends with him after all that and even everything what happened before. So 2 weeks ago I decided to cut contact. We haven't talked to each other since 2 weeks and all the trauma he caused me comes out and I cry all the time. I have anxiety attacks, I feel alone. I feel so bad and anxious. The fact that it was my first time trusting a guy to the point I give him my body and I experience that make me feel sick to my stomach. I even have nightmares about him. Why the trauma comes out now and not when it happened 3 months ago. Any advice for healing? Please, I need support. Story number 7. Somo, sort of a bizarre love/toxic triangle. Hi everyone, this is gonna be a pretty complex and long story that leaves me really dizzy. I live with a guy with whom I share a 7-year friendship as we are studying abroad. We had in the past months a period of disagreements and for 2 months our bond has loosened a bit. During this break, he became close with a girl who goes out with one of our group. I think he has fallen in love with her. He has a girlfriend and he has a boyfriend, but they don't see them as we are all studying abroad. In the meantime he got close with her. I noticed he became a lot colder with me, so I left him doing his things. One day this girl was at our house and I went out to buy some things. When I got back I overheard them talking about me from the stairs, and as he was saying positive things about our recovering our bond, like, today he did this to me and I was glad, and she would brought him down saying things like, you can't trust him, it's just a phase, you saw it today, he was obviously angry with you, and after this he would say, yes, you are right, it must be as you say. This happened a 3/4 times, as the next time she would come to our house, I paid attention when coming back from the stairs. Until yet another time I heard them talking about me this way. I got completely mad at him and told him that I overheard them from the stairs, and we had a long discussion. We cried and told each other everything. Now between us is all perfectly fine and it seems to me that our bond is stronger than before. I asked him to not talk anymore with this girl of our relationship as it hasn't been very useful, and that if he will have a problem with me to speak only with me. He opened up about his friendship with his girl and told me he noticed some red flag, but still she is very affectionate towards her. After all that I saw, seen, and that he told me, I started suspecting that she is a toxic person. My friend is a very sensible guy and she would get mad at him if he would get along, for example, with other people when she is not invited. I asked him the other night to come out with another group of friend, who stopped to go out with his girl for some past frictions, so that we could enjoy a relaxing night without this girl, to make him feel a bit relaxed. He wanted to come but felt the urge to advise her and she got mad at him and he didn't come as he spent all the night fighting with her. There are many other events in which he couldn't do things for the fear of her getting mad with him. So, I may be apprehensive, but I'm worried about this friendship with this girl for more than one reason. For the fear that doesn't feel free to do things he want to do, for the fear that she would try again to put him against me in the future, for the fear that he is doing all of this because he is in love with her and misinterpret what she does to him with signs of love. She don't want me to go with other people because she is jealous, for example. I don't want to go out with this girl anymore, but as she goes out with our group I will have to face her, and considered what these kind of people do, I am afraid she would try again to put him against me. So I would like to know, what should I do to protect myself and, maybe, expose her intention? I'm not into these things, but I want to shield myself. Okay, it's not over. Here's a plot twist. A few days ago I was in my bedroom, but my friend didn't know I was at home as I got back earlier from classes. As he was smoking in our living room, he would talk with himself saying, me knows me really well, he realized all of my insecurities. I will give him proof of what I always felt for him. My baby. In the meantime we were texting, as I were tolding when I will come home. Why I do like chatting with him so much, well, maybe no reasons at all, actually there is. A fantasy? No, it's just too intense. I mean, my heart is beating that fast for him, maybe I'm just crazy. So, what I heard suggests that he feels something for me. And it makes sense. I really notices recently he having attention for me that goes beyond a simple friendship. I didn't sleep for 48 hours, as all for this things happening, other things with my family as I suffer from insomnia. While I was telling him that I haven't slept very well, he offered to cuddle me, so we watched a film, while he was spooning me and cuddling, and we ended up sleeping on the couch. He has been so sweet, even in the morning he asked me if I managed to sleep at last. So, I really have no words about this bizarre situation. I mean, I was sure he loved her, and maybe he does, but it seems he also feels something for me, and what about me? How can I stay away from this girl, and do I reciprocate the feelings of my friend? I honestly never thought about it. Sorry for this to be this long, I even had to cut many other things. I hope this would be clear enough. Thanks for attention.